In 1996, AFETI, the Association for the Protection of Hamersley, Eld, and Taunton Inlets, was formed in anticipation of a huge aquaculture expansion proposed for areas in the South Puget Sound. This nonprofit citizen action group has spent nearly 15 years trying to help maintain the fragile ecosystem and preserve the quality of life for all native species in South Puget Sound. Groups like the Coalition to Protect Puget Sound Habitat and the Sierra Club share AFETI's concern with the stewardship and health of these vital waters. But the relentless push by major aquaculture companies have continued to the point where their high-density corporate farming practices are threatening water quality, the quality of life for species, and the very integrity of our public waters.
Industrial aquaculture has moved in, and it's not your grandfather's oyster farm anymore. It used to be where they had clams and they had oysters on the beaches. Didn't use plastics, didn't use that many nets. And now we're finding that you have oysters in grow bags, you have manila clams with nets over them, and now we have geoduck feedlots, which are 40,000 PVC pipes in each acre. And it's changing the ecology of the sound. It is eliminating our native species. It's introducing massive amounts of leaching toxic plastics. And we're very concerned. We're an estuary of national significance, and we want to protect it, and we wanted something here for the future generations to be able to see some native species and not have to go to a beach museum to do it.
Since 1997, 1998, there's been a real spool up in activity. It's actually turned into an industry using manufacturing methods to promote the product. It's been a dramatic change visually and environmentally, and is very observable.
Groups like AFETI and other citizen organizations concerned with environmental impacts of the massive expansions are not anti-aquaculture. They simply want a balanced, planned, and science-based approach that protects the waters, beaches, and native habitats, balancing business with nature.
Sierra Club and the citizens that are all doing this are not anti-aquaculture, but we are for having some species left. I don't think any of us want to see all these species grown, whether it's geoduck, clams, oysters, mussels, at the expense of our native species, where we have miles and miles of plastic and all these commodities that are shipped, most of them out of the state of Washington. The geoduck, most of it shipped into Asia. And we put all of our species at risk for these 5 minutes of delicacy.
One of our early themes in challenging this, the project of the mussel rafts and now the geoducks is finding the balance so that marine critters can fare as well as the shellfish critters. And we want to have both. We don't want to have just a monoculture of just shellfish.
The concerns regarding intensive aquaculture center around the unnatural cultivation of non-native species. In the case of mussels, clams, and oysters, and also the farming methods used in the intertidal growing of geoduck clams.
With respect to the harvesting techniques of geoducks, the use of high pressure water hoses literally blows the clam to the surface. But in doing so, it releases a tremendous amount of siltation into the water, which is carried throughout the inlet by the tides, the winds, and the currents. And it smothers everything it touches on, and in essence, relieves that subject matter of its availability of oxygen, and it dies. The other thing here on the mussel rafts, there's a species of what's called colonial tunicates. It's a recent invader into South Puget Sound. It's here, and it's found to be growing on the mussel rafts and the mussel lines over here on Gallagher Cove. Anytime you disturb the tunicate, if a piece of it breaks off, it'll float away into some other area and colonize there. So that's an incredibly invasive species. The other thing is the mussels themselves. The Galla provincialis, or in other words, the Mediterranean mussel, is a non-indigenous species. It's not native to the state of Washington. And it has a prolific ability to hybridize with the native mussels and outcompete the existence of native mussels. It also colonizes. The larva that's given off by these things will go anywhere, and it'll attach itself to docks, pilings, the beach substrate, all sorts of environments. The native mussel is kept in check naturally, but the Galla provincialis has no known predators, and so if it continues to colonize, it could very well outcompete and overtake completely the native mussel here. So those are a few impacts as a result of the practices of aquaculture here.
Longtime residents of these once pristine inlets have been witness to the destruction of habitat and the near eradication of native species.
The Totten Inlet is suffering. Once plentiful runs of cutthroat trout have diminished to just a mere trickle. The smelt that were here in abundance for years and years and years are gone. There are no surf perch anymore. The cabezon, the dogfish, are gone. And they're gone because the phytoplankton and the zooplankton are not here. There's no food. Herring spawning this is one of the most prevalent herring spawning areas. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a herring today in Totten Inlet.
While county and state governments try to wrestle with regulations that might balance the scales, the aquaculture industry seems to be only concerned about one thing:
Money. There's a lot of money in fish farms, there's a lot of money in shellfish, and as long as people keep paying the money and regulators keep turning their sights and looking at the dollars or looking at the lobbying efforts of these industries, then we're going to continue to have this going on. And it's time people get really mad if that's what it takes.
The fecal chloroform index count here in Totten Inlet is the cleanest anywhere in Puget Sound. So the proponent would say that the production of shellfish cleans the water. The water doesn't need to be cleaned, it's already clean. It's just fine. That's why shellfish produce so prolifically here, is because there is clean water and it works just fine. We don't need anything else to clean the water.
We kind of started to question the practices that we were seeing because we began to recognize that this was interfering with kind of the local marine environment, the waterfowl, the heron that would normally parade up and down the beach, fishing in 1 foot of water, and then diving in with their heads and plucking out their food. Now they weren't there on the beach anymore because there was the habitat that they were normally do this in was gone. It was being used up by the gooey ducks and the oysters. So you cover all this low tide area with plastic. That's something that's really dramatically changed, and that would be, for our terms, we call that armoring the beach.
Armoring the beaches with PVC pipes, plastic bags, and nets is exactly what the aquaculture industry has done in recent years. And their mammoth mussel rafts seem to create dead zones in the areas underneath, as independent divers have found and documented in recent years.
What they found was Beggiatoa, which is a fungus product that only exists with a complete lack of oxygen, and there was no life, and the bottom was covered with other very undesirable plants and fungus that occur in an oxygen-depleted dead zone.
Concerned about the lack of stewardship by the aquaculture industry and their disregard for the very waters that have been serving that industry for over a century, the citizens of South Puget Sound are standing up for our public waters.
I think that the citizens and the Sierra Club and environmental organizations like to see a balanced approach. An approach where they have X amount of industrial activity, they have X amount of natural shellfish that are on the beach with no nets, no tubes, and then you have X amount of areas that are natural where the animals can come feed and to breed and to live like they normally did. And it has to be balanced, and without balance, we all lose.
How much industrial-scale aquaculture can our waters support? What is the impact to our public lands? How much is too much? AFETI and our partner organizations urge you to make your voice heard. Let your county, state, and federal officials know that you care about the public waters of Puget Sound, and that you don't want short-term greed to overshadow the long-term balance of these waters. A balance that's needed to ensure a healthy ecosystem for future generations and all the species that call the Puget Sound home. To learn more, visit us online at affetti.com.